You guys are all ready? Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the St. Helena Planning Commission for December 1st, 2015. And if we could all rise to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Koberstein,
Here.
Commissioner Sweeney,
Present.
Commissioner Monet,
Here.
Commissioner Kistner,
Present.
Chairperson Parker.
Present. Moving on to a public forum, this is an opportunity for the public to address the Commission on items of interest to the public that are not listed on tonight's agenda. Because of restrictions imposed by the Brown Act, the Commission may not engage in discussion nor take action on matters not described on the agenda. Please observe the time limit of 3 minutes.
Jeff Ellsworth, 1434 Sylvaner. I'm here to do my weekly report on binge tourism, alcohol tourism. We're seeing a dangerous precedent in St. Helena and on the county roads that connect us all. A precedent, I think, that's endangering the health, welfare, and safety of our citizens. I got some reports from the Napa Register. Here's one. It says, Napa County motorists, bicyclists, and pedestrians have almost twice the chance of being seriously hurt in traffic accidents as residents living in the 9-county Bay Area as a whole. There's another one from last week. Tourists killed crossing Highway 221 on foot. They were staying at the Meritage Hotel. She was killed by a vehicle. She was impaired. She was impaired. She is suspected of being under the influence of alcohol. The driver was not. There's another one. Suspect in Calistoga B&B, death held over for trial. That was something that happened in Calistoga. Tourism related. About 2 weeks ago, motorists killed during rally for vintage Porsches. There was out in Pope Valley. 2 cars, Porsches crashed. One person was killed. So I think we're seeing probably seeing it every week now, right? Then we had the alcohol cited in death of the cyclist on wedding anniversary, the one that happened in town here where the woman was crushed. So we're discussing adding more hotels, more tourism. I think we need to do a serious cost-benefit analysis to the community, and where we look at maybe short-term financial benefits. Is there a long-term benefit to the community, or do we see simply a spiraling down of the value of what it means to live here? One of the problems is that our citizens are starting to move away because they don't want to live here or live in a place that has weekly stuff like this. One of these days, it's going to be one of us. You know, it's going to hit a little closer to home. It won't just be a tourist that's killed. I don't mean to dismiss the tourists. Their lives are of equal value. But maybe there's a disconnect. I heard another story recently in Napa. There was a rape in a hotel, and the hotel did not report it to the police because it would give them a red flag. So there was a lawsuit involving that, and I still have to get more information on that, but I will bring that, once I get that, I will bring that forward. So I think we need to seriously look at where we are as a community and as a town and decide if this is the road we want to go down. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak at public forum? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to our consent items. We have 2 this evening. We have the approval of the minutes from our November 17th, 2015 meeting, and then a design review exemption for 1837 Fir Hill Drive. Would anyone like to pull either of those items either from the commission or the audience? Seeing none, I would like to have a motion to approve the consent items.
I move that we approve the consent items.
Second?
Commissioner Kistner,
Yes.
Commissioner Sweeney,
Yes.
Commissioner Koberstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Monette,
Yes.
Chairperson Parker.
Yes. Moving on to our public hearings, we have 3 this evening. Our first one is a variance and design review for 1508 Spring Street. Can we have a staff report, please?
Surely, Commissioner Parker, Chairperson Parker. The existing 6,970 square foot small lot at 1508 Spring Street is currently developed with a 983 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, single-story, single-family residence on a raised subfloor. The existing home is listed on the City of St. Helena's Historic Resource Inventory. The applicant is seeking design review approval to remodel and expand the existing residence by approximately 1,178 square feet, resulting in approximately 2,101 square feet of total living space in the main home. This will involve demolishing 451 square feet, an addition that was built in the 1960s, and adding a new 2-story, 1,629 square foot addition to the rear of the home, thereby making the home 1 story in the front and 2 stories in the rear. It should be noted that because the existing home is on a raised subfloor, the 2-story addition will only increase the home's height by approximately 3 feet in the rear. All exterior changes and additions will be finished with materials that match or complement those on the existing home. The applicant is also requesting to construct a new 400 square foot second unit and pool toward the rear of the property. The second unit would be constructed to match the main house. It would stand approximately 4 feet 11 inches tall. As far as floor area ratio is concerned, the applicant is proposing 2,161 square feet with a 400 square foot second unit, and the 400 square feet of the second unit is exempt from FAR maximums for a floor area ratio of 0.31, which is below the maximum allowed on site by approximately 220 square feet. In addition to the design review approval, the applicant is requesting a variance for covered parking. As the existing use is expanding, the municipal code requires 1 covered parking space on the property. That being said, the existing parcel is a legal non-conforming small lot, as it is less than 7,000 square feet, has a lot width of only 36 feet, 42 feet is the minimum small lot width, currently has no covered parking, and is also a listed historic resource. Due to the narrowness of the parcel, the only place to put the covered parking would be in the side or front elevation of the existing historic home, which would detract from the historic significance of the home, as well as from the street view, as a new architecturally inconsistent feature was placed in front of or attached to the historic resource. Staff finds the proposed configuration of the site, the overall design elements, and proposed materials and finishes are in character with the neighborhood and the community, and that proposed changes will not negatively affect the historic nature of the home. Furthermore, the existing home and property is in a deteriorated condition and in need of repair. For these reasons, staff believes that variance and design review findings can be made and recommends approval of the project. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Are there any questions of staff? Were there any ex parte communications to disclose?
I walked by the property, but I didn't speak to anyone.
All right, perfect. And then we do have a letter, we do not have any letters on this, but we do have a spreadsheet of FARs that should be on the back there just to disclose. And with that, I would like to invite the applicant up and open up the public hearing. Is the applicant? What? Yeah. And if you could come up to the podium and state your name for the record, though not required.
Linda Tunney. I've been a resident in St. Helena for 30-some years. Actually, I'm not in the city limits, but I've been here for a while, donkey's years.
Perfect.
Do
Do
you
you
have
have,
a
anything to
question?
add to the staff report? Are there any questions for the applicant?
Does anybody have
I
any?
do, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a, oh, excuse me. Oh, I thought,
No, I'm finished.
Yeah, I'm offering questions for the applicant since she's here. Is there any questions of the applicant?
I'm just curious how, I went by there and I couldn't see where there was room for access to the back house, so can you explain that to me?
There is no car access to the lot due to the it's an extremely narrow lot.
That's what I
And
saw.
cars, there is no car access. But
So-
the access to the rear unit would be on the right side along the property line.
Okay, and that's how the fire department or anyone else would access that?
There wouldn't be any fire department access. There isn't now, and there wouldn't be then. It's just a very narrow lot.
Right, but there's nothing in the back right now. I think there has about the hose can go 100 feet or something like that.
The fire department standard is 150 feet from where the vehicle can park. The fire department did not identify any concerns with the proposed development.
Thank you.
Is there anything else?
All right.
Yeah.
Regarding the parking, I mean, your site plan shows 2 cars parked on the side,
In tandem, right.
so they can pull up alongside and still be on your property?
Yes. Actually, yes.
Okay, and the one that is parked in front of the house, it actually, when I look at your landscape plan, it's parked on top of some shrubs and things, so something has to switch.
Yeah, that third space was added later when we determined that they would be required to add a third space. Staff isn't terribly supportive of that, but they can fit it on there. Hopefully it wouldn't be used and it'd be more of like a patio area, but it's to meet the code requirement for parking.
And there would only be requirement for 2 cars if there weren't a second unit. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Would anyone else like to speak at the public hearing on this agenda item?
If there's any concerns about anything, I'd be happy to hear.
Perfect, thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to close the public hearing and invite commission discussion. Who would like to go first?
Well, I had a question, but we switched to the public hearing before I could get it in my head to ask. But I'm looking at variances and what, and the variance, in order to have the variance, it has to be something that's created by the property and not man-made, okay. But it seems to me that the need for a third place is not created by the property. It's created because a person wants a second unit on the property. So can you?
The second unit's
Yes.
permitted by right. We're here to look at the design of the second unit. Oh, yeah, and in addition to that is the thing, it's a 36-foot wide lot. So, I mean, the minimum for a small lot's 42, so that lot exists in its
Right.
current configuration at 36 feet wide.
I understand that. I didn't understand that the by right second unit meant that just comes along with the property, and that is not something that this particular design is precipitating, a need that this particular design.
Adding the second unit is creating the need for a third parking space and a covered parking space. They can accommodate the third parking space. Accommodating the covered parking with the historic home would be an issue.
But that
And isn't, just so I'm clear, because my impression was our discussion or our question is really around the variances on covered parking.
Correct.
So the second unit isn't creating, that's not the man-made issue. The whole issue is the fact that it's not a 42-foot wide lot. So therefore, covered parking is being discussed as the variance because of the lot size, not because of adding the, you wouldn't have had a 3-car covered parking anymore than we'd have a 2-car covered. We can't do the covered parking because of the lot size.
In addition to its historic status.
So the number of spaces is not at issue here.
No,
That's
'cause
not what the
they-
variance
They
is.
can accommodate it.
I mean, I think to Commissioner Coverstein's point, it's not ideal, and it's probably not practical, nor will it happen, but that's not we have to kind of stay within the construct of what our decisions are tonight, and it's, do we approve the variance or not relative to the lot size and the historic property?
Then I have another concern. I'm just thinking if there's a pool in the back, and there's really no place for a vehicle to get in the back to do any repairs or to just have any access to, that's doesn't make any difference.
I don't think the vehicle in the back ever was on the table.
Correct, but
They
there
couldn't have
wasn't
gotten
a-
the vehicle back
there wasn't a
regardless if they
second
didn't
unit
build
in
or
the
not.
back before. I mean, now they're proposing a second unit, so it seems that there might be a need for, with a pool, so that there might be a need for access. But I'm just bringing that up. I'm just, I'm asking you guys to help me understand that.
I think practically what you're saying, probably there's some thought around that, but it's not really consistent with what our discussion or what we're approving or not approving. How they approach is not up for discussion.
Yeah, the access to the back and the pool and the second unit
aren't part of our decision-making process tonight.
I understand. It's
Would
just
it
a
be
concern
helpful
for
if
public
staff
safety
weighed in
and-
on this and just put it in context for everyone and the audience included?
There's no requirement for vehicular access to a second unit. The vehicular access is to the parcel, which provides a primary unit and a secondary unit. There's no code requirement that an individual occupying the second unit be able to drive to it
Right, or,
past the primary structure.
okay, even if there's a pool there and if that might be a public safety hazard for some reason, and nobody can get to it. Okay.
Again, no public safety concerns are identified with the proposed design.
Would anyone else like to chime in?
Yeah, I
Chair
have,
Cooperstein?
I have some concerns, and I'd like to have some discussion with the other commission members to see, how we feel generally about this. I think it's wonderful that the applicant wants to improve the historic structure. It's, not in a great condition at the moment. But I have two primary concerns with this. First is the overall scale of the project. When I walked around the neighborhood, I tried to get a general feel of the size of the homes in the area. And as I am wont to do, I took that assessor's map, and went to the public information on the website to just see if what I sensed visually was what was on the ground, which was what led me, to produce this chart. I'd really be happy if the applicants would produce these charts and certify them to us so that we would have the information all the time. But nonetheless, when I look at this, I see, setting aside the design or what it looks like, the overall mass of the building on the property is much larger than most of the rest of the neighborhood. And even the small lots, even the 36-foot wide lots. I also noted that almost every home, with the exception of maybe one, either has a garage or a carport, some kind of covered parking, even the very smallest lots. And while I can appreciate that you don't want a garage in the front of this house or right on the side because of the historic character, I don't think parking 3 cars in the front yard adds anything to the historic character. I think it detracts from the character of the home. As for the parking, in my view, if you can park 2 cars alongside of the house, you can continue a driveway to the back, and you could have a parking area behind this house, which would alleviate the need for the variation in this case. I think the only reason you can't do it at the moment is because of the way the addition was designed, and the back part of the addition is wider than the front of the house, which makes it a little bit difficult to get back there. In my mind, that's a self-created hardship. I think that you could create a covered parking space in the back if you slightly redesigned the addition that's going on the back of the house. I think that while a second unit is a permitted use, I think it's exacerbating the overall mass on the property in this case, and I would much rather see the floor area used to provide the parking. You could put the covered parking back there, you get 200 square feet of floor area that doesn't count. But to add another 400, granted, you get an exemption for it, but you've still got a building back there in bulk that, in my view, is really not in character with the rest of this block. And, I'm more than willing to hear what other people think about it, but that was my general impression looking at it. In fact, when I read the historic resource report, the author of that said this is a very large addition for a cottage of this size. She did go on to say it was mitigated to some extent by the design, and that's true. As for the cottage, the effect of the addition on the cottage is mitigated, still doesn't address the impact on the neighborhood. And when I look at design review, the first standard here is consistency and compatibility with applicable elements of the general plan. And one of the elements there in the land use section is that new additions and buildings should reflect the scale and proportion of the surrounding neighborhood. And in this case, I think it's too much on too small of a piece of property.
That's what I meant to say.
You didn't leave us much, Mary, but
No,
I'm
not
going
at all.
I'm going to tell you that I didn't check number one, but I checked compatibility of design too massive, relationship of design to the site too massive, determine that the design is compatible, can't determine for sure. There's no palette or renderings that really show you what it's really going to look like. Whether the design promotes harmonious transition in scale and character, I say no. Whether the architectural design of structure and the materials and colors are appropriate to the function of the project, I don't know. And anyway, I could go on. I also agree that with some design that there could be some parking in the back, or at least a carport. And I just think the whole project is too massive for that neighborhood. And I'm very familiar with that neighborhood. I spent a lot of time over there.
And I want to add, I know we had, in fact, I went by that house today on Vineland Street. We had a 32, we had a very small lot that we discussed here a while, last year sometime. And I know that that was one of the things that we were setting a precedent for, or at least expressing a desire that we not overmass the small lots especially, that we not overmass in general, but particularly the smaller lots. I think that was, we sent people back twice at least with that directive, so I think that applies in this case too.
Commissioner Sweeney, anything to add?
I'd like to request to speak for a minute.
All right, I will open up the public hearing again. Excuse me, yes?
Typically, public comments.
Oh, actually, I will leave it to my commissioners. Would you like me to open up the public hearing again to hear the applicant? Yes? Yes? All right, then I will open up the public hearing to hear the applicant. Okay, perfect, sounds.
Okay, well, in case the planners have anything to get out in front of me, I'd be happy to have them speak in my place. But we have, I have been looking at this house for years and years. A good friend of mine lives next door. And if there's anything that thrills or gets me excited, it's a remodel. And particularly in the case of a house that has been derelict for some time. And I was absolutely thrilled to get a chance to buy this. The people that had had it before just decided that it was going to be too hard to build anything on it. And had I known what I was going to run into, I would have been scared off myself. However, it is a very narrow lot, and as far as your thoughts of the possibilities of parking in the back, there is none. You can't get a car back there now, and there's no way. It wasn't designed. The lot wasn't designed for cars, and we have tried in the face of the difficulties to design something that would be extremely attractive for the neighborhood, and this is not a house I'm planning on renting. I know there's problems in this neighborhood, as you know, with some pretty sketchy stuff going on across the street. That is not me. I'm planning on living in this house, and we've tried to design something that would be extremely attractive from the front. I think that everyone here would be thrilled to look at the house from the front. We did put a second story on the back. It is terribly small as it is, and we labored to go within the purviews of what was, with the planners, of what was allowable in the city of St. Helena. I don't see how I could have done any more than I've done. And, you know, I've owned the house for a year. I'm certainly a year older. This has not been an easy process, and the planners have been extremely helpful and worked with us the whole time on what would be attractive and allowable. And we've done the best job we can. I don't know, for myself, I think this is probably my last hurrah. I don't think I could redo the project to make you happy. So I hope that you can find a way to approve it. I know the neighbors on both sides, and I certainly, you know, one house over is much taller than I'll ever be. And the neighbors on all sides are very enthusiastic. I think you probably have some letters there from them about, certainly they don't enjoy having a derelict house in the neighborhood. And anyway, I want you to know that I've done my best to make it attractive for the city of St. Helena. Thank you.
I have a
Is
question.
your architect here this evening?
I have a question for you.
And if you could come back to the podium, we have a question. We have two questions for you. One,
Is your architect here this evening with you?
This has been an architect by committee. My builder, Tom, who has an inner architect that he and we had another girl, Carolyn Leonhardt, who is not present at the moment, but we had a kind of a little architectural committee, so.
Well, I'm just puzzled by your statement that you can't park in the back when you're showing two cars parked on the side of the house.
On the side, you can, but
Why can't you continue to drive
I
back?
think you
Because
could get them back there, but I think getting them out would be the hard part.
you wouldn't be able to, no, you
How are you going to get out now? You're going to back out.
You can't turn around.
Oh, you can't turn around.
Well, you're not going to turn around now. You're going to back out onto Spring Street.
You couldn't get that. You could get the car back there, but you'd have to helicopter it out. You couldn't get around on that lot.
Well, I'm not trying to design your project, and,
No.
you know, I would like you to be able to improve the house, and maybe it's appropriate to consider some of these things and take a continuance. I don't know. We haven't heard from Commissioner Sweeney yet, but I have trouble supporting it as it's presented. I think it's, although you're within you're entitled to build under the zoning ordinance, I think it conflicts with the general plan and could maybe
Okay,
use some more thought.
I have a question.
if we could kind of focus just on questions for the applicant and then go back to the discussion, that would be great, just to kind of keep it clean.
I have
Okay,
a-
perfect.
I think the challenge that maybe I'm hearing Mary speak to is the fact, and I think Juliana Inman addressed it, although I believe, I have a great deal of faith in Juliana Inman's input, and I believe that my interpretation of the letter, she feels good about the final product. And I know that it's very important to her what we do with historical properties. So I think that's important to take into consideration. The one question I would have, but I don't think doesn't avoid the backing out, but what creates a little bit of the massing is the addition on the back, the width, not necessarily the height. I personally don't have a problem with the height. This is a tiny lot. There are bigger homes on that street. There are smaller homes on that street, but I don't think I'm much less concerned about massing. I don't consider this to be a massive house. I think you've got a very tiny, narrow lot, which makes it look visually, it's different because you're up to the size of the lots, but I don't think this is a particularly massive house. However, the choice to do the width of the back addition, both upstairs and downstairs, you have playroom that could have come in and been at the same width of the front of the house. Right. So that was a conscious decision, I think, as Mary said, and I do agree with it. That wasn't a constraint of the lot. That was a design choice, one way or the other. But I'm not so certain that just eliminating that and driving the car backing out of a long driveway is not an easy thing to do. I think the question really becomes, from a design, replacing the second unit with covered parking, because then you are pulling in and backing out, which I think what you're trying to get to. I don't know that that's necessarily something I feel is my place to force on an applicant. That's the only way around it, is to replace that second unit. So talk to us about your decisions, which would help us, on the width of the addition and the decision to have a second unit versus to have a garage. Because you have a shed somewhere on the line.
Right.
So a garage and so why go that route?
Do you want to explain why the garage was not
Yeah.
a garage in the back was just not a possibility?
And why is that? That would be helpful to understand.
Well, because you can't get out of it. You can pull in, but you can't, there's nowhere to back around and get out.
Was the lot
The lot
determined
is
to
so
be
narrow.
too narrow to have a turnaround?
It's too narrow to have a turnaround.
It'd be very difficult.
Even without the second unit and pool?
Well, what if you
Oh,
shifted
yeah.
Okay,
Because
that's what I
if you had the second unit, the garage would have to go maybe way in the back where the oak tree, the great treasure of the lot is a historic oak tree in the back, and you can't go anywhere near the roots of that, certainly not with a garage. So you would be forced to put the garage in the middle of the lot, and then there's nowhere to back out and get out. You just don't have the, I don't know. Aaron, do you have some?
Well, there's a lot of land taken up with which I am sympathetic to my fellow commissioners, that there's a lot of land devoted to the second unit and the pool. I'm not opposed to that, but I'm hearing that there's opposition because the decision to dedicate that space to those uses versus parking or a turnaround driveway or a garage were a decision. They weren't a force of the lot. That was a conscious design decision. So I think that's what you're getting at. And I don't have I'm not opposed to that. These folks are opposed to that. So I think you have to help walk them through why that was the choice. And
Yeah. Would it be all right if
That's
my
fine. Of course.
design builder had a few comments?
Good evening. I'm Tom Trainer, and I'm a local contractor, and I'm also a neighbor. I live a block away. So I wanted to address some of the issues regarding the design. So yes, there is a way that you could put a garage in the back of the property by, you'd have to have a 10-foot setback along the east property line, which would mean the house would only be 21 feet wide. With the staircase going up, it actually narrows the size of the rooms to make them very difficult to utilize, but you could do that. But then the backyard would primarily be a garage. And so
could I ask
Yes,
one
sir.
pause? Can you clarify, I thought on this lot that it is a 5 foot because of the narrowness of the lot, it's only a 5 foot, not a 10 foot.
That's correct.
Right.
Small lots.
Yeah, the lot's only
So you're not, but there isn't a 10 foot requirement on this lot.
no, there's only 5 foot side yard setback.
I believe you were saying it was 10 feet for parking and then for
I said
driving.
if you wanted to get a car behind there, you would have to have a 10-foot side setback.
For convenience, but not by ordinance, right?
Well, just to get a car back there. I mean, you can't, you can't drive a car through a
physics.
5-foot space. Motorcycle, perhaps, but so what you're requesting my client to do would be to make her backyard a parking lot, which I think really limits her enjoyment of her property. And I think all we're asking for is a variance not to have covered parking. Now, there's many instances around here where we have built places and worked on places where there isn't any covered parking. There are many instances where people have put in covered parking and then don't use them. They use them as outdoor covered patios, things like that. So, I'm just saying that from our standpoint, we've worked with Linda for some time now trying to design something that met zoning requirements. The covered parking was the one thing we couldn't come up with an effective way to do it without sacrificing the entire backyard. So I ask you to consider that.
I understand.
Are there any other questions of the applicant, or may I close the public?
Yes, I was just wondering, because of this issue, how attached you are to the second unit and the pool.
And if you could come up to the podium with your answer, so it can be caught on the video. Excuse me.
I don't know.
Well, I have a little, I'm very attached to
Okay.
a second unit. And I'm very attached to the pool. I mean, that would be a real loss for me not to have a pool in the back. I just think that's a lovely thing to look at and to use. I have a pool now, and even if I'm not in it, I just like looking at it. So, yeah, it would be a big loss. And the second unit, I have a little extra building on my house that I live in now, and I don't know, I often find people camping out there, friends, and who knows who, caregivers, I'm sort of looking now to the future, but I would really love to have a little second unit, and
Okay.
so,
Thank
yes,
you.
I'm
I
attached.
hear what
Thank
you're
you.
saying. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? No? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing again and re-invite commissioner discussion.
I'll start, because I think I might be the outlier here. I believe that it's been well thought out. I disagree that there's massing. I understand relative to this lot that there's a lot of building and space on here. However, I don't see this as our role to decide if we could reduce the square footage by eliminating the second unit, but we can't force the applicant to replace that with a garage that's very difficult to use. And I think that the enjoyment in the design and what she's trying to construct here loses a lot of its value to the applicant by taking those structures away. And since we don't have a way to replace one with the other, I think we're talking about, we're getting off track of what I think the question was the variance on the parking. And so I'm trying to think of it through that mind's eye. And if this lot was a little bit wider, we wouldn't be thinking a bit about FAR. We've seen many of the other discussions we've had around homes and massing have been much larger homes. So I think we have to be consistent in terms of what that looks like. And this neighborhood and this part of town has a variety of homes. And this is one little segment of it, but driving up and down String Street, there are much bigger homes. So anyway, I'm in support. I don't know if that'll be what it takes tonight, but I'm in support of this project.
Commissioner Monette?
Well, I'm thinking the massing question to me is absolutely contextual. I mean, it's absolutely relative to the size of the lot. And I remember the lot that I was speaking of, they wanted some 1,700 square feet, and the lot seemed appropriate for 1,300 square feet, and that's what was decided. So, certainly 1,700 square feet objectively by itself is not massive, but 3 feet from the neighborhood. So anyway, on that point, I mean, this is a heartbreaker. I'm really, it's not easy. I'm really tugged on this one. But the thing that tugs me is that I'm not sure we can grant a variance if it doesn't meet the requirement to be a variance. So that's the place where I'm having some trouble. Otherwise, since no neighbors have objective, that seems to be the only sticking point that bothers me. Makes it difficult for me to support this project. Otherwise, I can.
Commissioner Kistner?
I can't support it the way it is. I could see a couple things we could do, but I'm not going to redesign it. But the way it is, I can't support the project.
Commissioner Koberstein?
I feel the same way. I would encourage the applicant to maybe take a continuance and take a harder look at what could happen in the backyard. It might be possible to have some combination of maybe not a complete second unit, but a guest house with a carport attached to it or something to handle that. And I'm generally not one who gets too worked up about FAR. I mean, first time we discussed this, my view always was you have to look at the immediate neighborhood. And in this case, I just think that it's too much for the immediate neighborhood. You can't always put everything you want on the property and satisfy the standards of the general plan. And to me, that's part of the problem here.
Perfect. Well, I'm a combination of, unfortunately, no, I think that we're at the end of commissioner discussion. I'm sorry. There's two issues I see here. It's the parking variance and the massing. I actually am okay with the parking variance given the narrowness of the lot, and I do think that it would be very difficult to have a parking spot in the very back. I also think it kind of is stealing from Paul to pay Peter a little bit and doesn't seem like smart design. So that's why I am okay with the variance given the age of the home and with that historic nature. I'm taking that into consideration. If it was a house that you could bulldoze and kind of rearrange a little bit more, I would be singing a different tune. With the massing, I do think it's too large for the lot, and I would like to suggest that we have a continuance to maybe relook at the design to bring it down a little bit. I don't have a problem with the second unit, but I do think that there's just too much for that lot. I don't know how my other commissioners feel on that about that.
Well, I could live with that massing if I would like to hear from staff again. Why wasn't it considered a function of the design that the variance is being at? You know, I know it's a narrow lot, but if there were a design that would accommodate the parking, what was your argument again?
One, we don't design the projects to accommodate the parking in the rear.
Well, to do whatever you needed to do to not have to ask for a variance.
It was presented as not feasible, and looking at the lot, it being a historic home, the covered parking from staff's perspective isn't something we would support in the front or side of the home. And if those were the only two places, then we wouldn't be supportive of that due to the historic nature of the home.
Okay.
Staff did look at alternative designs that incorporated a carport kind of almost attached or in the front of the home or to the front side portion of the property. We did not ask for a circulation exhibit showing whether or not it would be feasible to provide access to the rear of the parcel. That's something that could be provided to the commission separately if the commission chooses to continue the project. Separately from that, given that the project does meet the FAR, staff recommended approval of the project given that it met the development criteria. However, Commissioner Koberstein and others have voiced concerns over massing, which is a valid concern given the requirements of design review and the general plan.
Do we have a motion?
Well, I would move that we continue this till our next meeting or the following one when the applicant determines that she's ready to come back and try to address some of the issues we've raised.
Yeah, I'd suggest we continue it to a date uncertain as opposed to putting a date on it.
Okay.
I second that. Excuse me, I second that.
Roll call.
Commissioner Koberstein?
Yes.
Commissioner Kistner?
Yes.
Commissioner Sweeney?
No.
Commissioner Monette?
No.
Chairperson Parker?
Yes. All right. Thank you very much. Moving on to our next agenda item. It is a demolition permit and design review for 1003 Charter Oak Avenue. May we have a staff report, please?
Yes, Chairperson Parker. The existing 1 1/4 acre flag lot parcel is currently developed with a 1,470 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-story single-family residence with a 200 square foot attached carport and 3 detached accessory structures. The subject property is accessed by a 12-foot wide access easement over the parcel adjacent to Charter Oak Avenue. The applicant is seeking a demolition permit and design review approval to demolish the existing structures in order to construct a new 3,937 square foot, 1-story single-family residence with a 363 square foot detached second unit and 499 square foot detached garage. As stated on the plans, the new structures would be finished with stucco over ICF block walls, which is much more energy efficient than traditional wood framing. All roofing would be standing seam galvanized metal. Windows and doors would be constructed of recessed wood with metal cladding. The height of the proposed 1-story home is approximately 26 feet to the top of ridge, which is approximately 4 feet taller than the existing 2-story home to accommodate vaulted ceilings. The two homes along the access easement leading to the home, combined with the existing trees and landscaping, mainly obstruct direct views from Charter Oak. The closest neighboring house to the proposed project is the home adjacent to the access easement on Charter Oak. The proposed new home would be farther from the property line as the existing home. As far as floor area ratio is concerned, the subject property has a maximum floor area ratio of 0.21. However, the maximum gross floor area permitted for any parcel over 20,000 square feet in the medium density district is 4,200 square feet, excluding FAR exempt 400 square feet per second unit, 200 for garage, and 120 for the non-inhabitable accessory structures. The applicant is proposing 3,937 square feet, with 363 square feet for a detached second unit and 462 square feet detached garage, or 4,762 square feet total. With the FAR exemptions noted above, the project will consist of 4,199 square feet, which is 1 square foot less than the maximum square footage permitted, for a floor area ratio of 0.07. While there is a lot of square footage associated with the project, the parcel is very large and can easily accommodate the building size. Furthermore, the massing of the structure is somewhat broken up between the home, second unit, and garage, as they are each detached, although the separation is lessened by the fact that the breezeways are roofed. Because of the size of the parcel, the fact that the proposed home is only 1 story, and because the parcel borders agricultural land on one side, staff believes the project won't negatively affect neighboring properties and therefore recommends approval of the project. It should be noted that one letter, which has been placed on the dais, was submitted, or actually it was an email submitted after the packet went out, and expressed concerns about the size and location of the proposed home, as well as the easement maintenance. In response to that, the proposed size and location of the home is at the discretion of the property owner, as long as it meets our development standards. The replacement or reconstruction of a single-family home on a parcel of record is permitted by right. As far as the easement is concerned, if it is of record, then maintenance responsibilities would be recorded with the easement. However, in this case, it's more of a prescriptive easement, therefore it's a civil matter, the maintenance. Any expansions of use in the future, i.e. a subdivision of the remaining portion of the parcel, would require discretionary approvals, which would likely require a larger access over the existing parcel, and that would be at the discretion of the homeowner who owns the property in which the easement is on. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Are there any ex parte disclosures?
I drove. What
I drove to the area.
I visited the site.
I walked to the site, but I didn't talk to anyone.
I would like to open up the public hearing and.
Can I ask the staff a
Oh,
question?
of course, yes. Are there any questions of staff at this time? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Looking at the plans, I don't think this is a second unit. And I'm not sure that it qualifies for the 400 square foot exemption, because the plans do not, a second unit, totally self-contained cooking facilities. This is truly a guest house, and that's the way it's labeled on the plans. And so I think you have to count that square footage. I don't believe it's exempt.
I believe bath or kitchen creates a second. I don't think it has to have cooking facilities. I think it's bath or
I
kitchen
think-
facilities.
I think it, well, we can look at the definition, but I think it has to be capable of independent living, and you need to be able to cook. And every second unit we've seen has
The kitchen.
kitchen facilities. So I think it does fall in the guest house definition.
I believe Commissioner Culberstein's correct in that a true second unit must contain cooking facilities. I am verifying with the code right now.
And in that case, I think we're slightly over the FAR here. Either add a kitchen or you you do something.
I'm going to take a brief moment for Noah to.
things aren't always so easy to find in this code.
I kind of feel like I need to do some stand-up up here for you guys. How about them Warriors? They're not playing
Do you have the
tonight.
code? Do you have the place?
Do
for
you
the code?
do you happen to have it, Mary? Yes.
No, yeah, the code, the
So
where it's located.
In reviewing the code, it references allowed uses and secondary uses, and one second unit as defined in section 1704.160 and consistent with provisions of another section. But then you go to the definition section, which is 1704.160. Second dwelling unit is not identified. However, studio dwelling unit means any habitable room having cooking facilities and intended or designed to be used for combined living, dining, and sleeping purposes. And staff would typically determine that a second dwelling unit must have separate kitchen facilities, otherwise it is a guest cottage.
Yeah, I mean, I see a definition here of second unit. Attached or detached residential dwelling unit.
Mary, microphone.
Attached or detached residential dwelling unit which provides complete independent living facilities for one or more persons, including permanent provisions for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation. This is, unless I don't have a correct zoning ordinance, it's in the definitions.
Under dwelling unit?
Under second unit, there's a definition of second unit. So, and there's a definition of guest house. I think what we see now is a guest house. It's not a second unit.
We could condition them to add a kitchen in the proposed
Yeah,
square footage.
I just want to make sure
And he seems
we know what we're looking at.
All right. So with that, any other questions of staff? All right. I'm going to open up the public hearing and invite the applicant to come forward, please.
I'd just like to confirm Commissioner Copperstein's statement. All other units are located in another section, but their second units are specifically defined.
Thank you. Oh,
Hi,
Crazy ordinance.
I'm Dan Schoenfeld, and this is my architect, Kevin Bryan.
hello.
Hi.
Would you like, is there anything that you'd like to add on? That's usually why we invite applicants up. Anything that you'd like to add on with the discussion on adding the kitchen to the guest room? Is it spatially going to actually fit within that space, considering the limitations that you already have for FAR?
It'll work out fine.
Yeah, we're absolutely planning on doing that. Absolutely planning on putting the kitchen in, and it should be, the spacing is good, as I understand it.
All right.
Is there a
questions?
reason it wasn't included in the plan as drawn?
It's a work in progress, and it can be defined in many ways, but, you know, I think the kitchen does make it nicer, you know, for somebody if they're going to stay longer term.
It's kind of hard to see how it's going to fit without a little reworking of your design. I think part of the reason of the 400-foot exemption is that you need a certain minimum space to get the facilities in there. And if you're getting the 400-foot exemption, you probably have to enlarge this a bit.
Considering it's 363
Yeah.
square feet.
I have a separate question.
Of course.
Could you address why you decided to site the home on the lot in the location that you did? The letter we've received from the neighbor, you know, is raising an issue because it's directly behind the neighbor's house, and you have a relatively large lot to work with.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think basically we looked at the lot and tried to determine, you know, where the best place would be closest to the road, but also allowing enough space to be able to, you know, access where we needed to do. I'm very, very happy to bring the house back somewhat if we need to. I'm happy to do that, and I was trying to get a hold of the neighbor briefly, but wasn't able to do so. So, yeah, we've got plenty of room to do additional, you know, distancing. So I have no problem with that at all.
I'm really happy to hear that, because I was going to ask if you had reached out to the neighbor and spoken with him about it, and I'm you know, it's not required.
Sure.
But I'm really happy to hear that, and that, you know, and that maybe could work with him so that he would you know, feel really supportive of what you're doing.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, and we've spoken briefly tonight, and we're more than happy to discuss that and to do it.
okay.
So,
Okay.
And the neighbor in his email to us did raise the question on the 12-foot easement and how previous potential buyers had turned away because of the width of the easement being 12 feet. Is that not a problem for you, or why are you comfortable with it where others were not?
where are we comfortable with the 12 feet? I think the other people were looking at, the possibility of adding additional lots in the future. And so that needs to be widened if you're going to do that. And we are looking at doing that at this point. But we were going to talk to the neighbor and try to work out a plan with him that would work out satisfactorily. We haven't had a chance to really sit down with him, not just because, I've been tied up and wanted to make sure I had all my ducks in a row before I, sat and discussed it with him. I wanted to get all the information I had to.
Okay.
Did you just say that you were thinking of doing that in the future?
Yes.
So you were thinking of building another house or two or whatever in the end?
Potentially dividing it, yes. But we want to speak with the neighbor and get all the information, and we're in the investigation stages right now.
Okay, gotcha.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Would anyone else like to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and invite commissioner discussion. Grace, would you like to tee off?
I agree with Mary's comments. I also agree with the neighbor that the structure should be more toward away from the lot line there. I think it would make it much easier. I really have no problem with the project as he's done it, except I think that if he'd move it back and do something with that guest house and make it into a true second unit, then I would have no problem with it.
My question is, how do we handle something like this? If there's some minor redesign that's necessitated, is that just something that then gets reviewed and approved by the staff, subject to a condition would put in our motion, or how do we do that?
I think we should ask the applicant if he'd be willing to bring it back.
Yeah, that's what
That's at the discretion of the commission. You could either condition the project and designate staff to confirm that the applicant addresses the condition, or you can continue the item and ask the applicant to redesign and bring it back.
Yeah, go ahead.
And my question is a little bit unrelated to this design as it is today, but if the applicant wanted to subdivide later, how would that be impacted by the floor area ratio of this project now? I mean, how does that look? Because I've not been on the commission when we've had one project kind of teed up to another.
It would be independent of that. Basically, any future subdivision would be required to meet general plan and zoning ordinance densities, and that would dictate the amount of parcels that would need to be created. This parcel would be independent of that as it's reconstructing an existing home.
But reconstructing it would change the FAR on what's left of the property, right? So how would that play?
Oh, it'd be required. It'd be required to meet FAR standards as they stand now. They wouldn't be able to make the lots really small and then subdivide around it.
And my problem with the subdivision is, Tracy, is if the way they've got the layout now, if they were going to subdivide, they probably have to go across the thing, and then you wouldn't have any access at all except through the property that they're keeping. I would have a problem with that.
Oh, yeah. I don't think it's right for us to discuss what it looks
It's
like, 'cause
not.
we haven't seen a
Yeah,
plan.
we don't have the
My
subdivision.
question was separate. It was about, we're looking at a current FAR ratio based on this lot as it stands today, and these buildings.
That's correct.
And outbuildings as they are now, so I'm not
Yeah.
questioning how they cut it. I just want to know how we factor that in later.
Future action could not create a non-conforming situation.
And I felt that it was huge. This is such a large house. However, it was on such a large parcel, but now the parcel may be changing so that, I know that they're going to
We
need
can't
to keep.
consider that now. My
Yeah,
question was
that's right.
simply, subdividing a lot force a nonconformance
Forming
that
effect.
we are kind of stuck with. And no, we're not, we're not stuck with it.
I really wasn't questioning it, Tracy. I was just making a comment.
Well,
It was difficult.
I still think it's relevant. I'm not, in this sense, that it was going to be not seen, well, let's see. I think it's really a massive house. It's really huge. And it's the hugest house, I think, in the neighborhood. I walked by there today. So it may be, it just seems like it's big. It's not, it's bigger than anything else in the neighborhood, even though it's a large piece of land.
It's a pretty large lot. It's
I know it is,
1.29
but-
acres.
So
And if I can't think tonight at all about the possibility that it will be subdivided, since that's the intention of it, then I'll have to retract my statements and wait until a time when I can speak to that.
'Cause-
I believe that would be an independent decision.
That's the point I was
You
going to
can't
make.
you can't make a serial decision based on information we don't have yet.
The applicant may have goals of subdividing, but whether that actually happens, we have no way of knowing.
Correct.
And that future subdivision would come before the commission, and the size of the existing home at that time, should this be approved, and the proposed lots could be considered as a part of the future subdivision review.
And wouldn't it actually be the creation of another flag lot?
Well, it would depend on the design, and
I mean, the only way to get to it is down the 12-foot drive.
It is a flat.
that's exactly right. The applicant has indicated currently, based on public works standards, we may not approve a subdivision of this parcel with that current access. So there's multiple things would have to happen to allow a subdivision of that parcel. It's not before the commission. That should have no relevance on the decision before the commission tonight.
The only thing that's important is your question is that if we were, it would be a conforming subdivision.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't making a decision that was locking me into something I didn't know all the facts. That was my point of the question, not design, not anything else.
It was a good question, Stacy.
No, I was
just had a
thinking the same
comment on it.
thing. All right. Commissioner Sweeney, are there any other comments?
Well,
No, I agree with everything that's been said. I think that we need to have clarity on what the second unit looks like. So I think the real issue is, back to what Commissioner Coverstein said, is can we make a decision on this plan, or do we pop it back and say, come back to us and show us what that looks like, and then decide? And it sounds like to me that's our discretion. So then I think we now need to have a discussion about that topic.
I think that, I feel that we should do that we should continue this and have them come back with the second unit designed appropriately and the other things that we mentioned.
Okay, and before we have a motion, is there anything else that anyone would like to add? I do. I would like to add that the conditions with the easement, that it is left in the manner that it was before, if we could somehow write that into.
But if we're continuing, we're not adding conditions right now, correct?
That's correct. And the easement's actually located on an adjacent parcel, so there's this property owner doesn't have control over that currently.
Okay, all right.
But
I'm concerned with that. It's at the end of the day, if it is approved, then that's fine. We can do it when it comes back to us. That if he destroys it, he has to put the easement back together.
But we can't get there till we.
But I think the speaking to the neighbor and considering moving the location is also something that we need to look at when it comes.
Okay. Is that something that we'd like to include in the motion? The shifting of the house back to suggest to the applicant, rather than have it come up again and have to ask him to continue it again? He seemed open to it.
He was very open to changing that, so, and just
Yeah, I would
speaking
be
to
in
the.
support of that.
Okay. If we could have a question?
I have one more question. I mean, I hate to throw another fly in the ointment here, but is the detached accessory garage permitted in front of the main house?
The zoning code does allow one detached structure to be located in front of a primary residence.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion?
Do it.
I move that we continue item
7.
7, and ask the applicant to come back or at a date uncertain, that the applicant bring back plans that detail the second unit so that we can consider it the FAR exemption in its true capacity with the second unit as defined by the ordinance, and that we have the applicant consider citing the project further back to accommodate neighbor concerns.
Second.
Commissioner Sweeney?
Yes.
Commissioner Kistner,
Yes.
Commissioner Koberstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Monette,
Yes.
Chairperson Parker.
Yes. Thank you very much. Moving on to our next agenda item, it is a use permit and design review for 1414 Main Street. May we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair Parker. The project before you tonight, as you mentioned, is a request for use permit and design review approval to modify an existing historic structure to accommodate a restaurant with outdoor seating at 1414 Main Street in the Central Business Zoning District. The applicant has proposed a combination of payment into the Parking Mitigation Fund and use of off-site parking to meet parking requirements for the project. The subject parcel is 3,630 square feet, developed with an existing 1,462 square foot historic cottage built in approximately 1870. And this structure, in its most previous use, was used as an office building for many years. It's located between an existing gas station and the Wide Down Hotel and has no on-site parking. In early 2014, the applicant received design review and use permit approval to convert the office use of the cottage to a wine tasting room and construct a small addition to the rear of the site, and no on-site parking was required at that time. The current request is requesting approval to operate a 52-seat restaurant with outdoor seating and construct an approximately 300 square foot addition to incorporate a kitchen into the building. Again, the applicant's proposing rather creative parking requirements as identified in Code Section 17-124. The general plan designation of the property is central business. It's located in the urban service area. There's multiple general plan policies that are identified in the staff report that the staff feels that the project conforms with. The zoning identifies that restaurants are conditional uses, so there's a use permit before you. That's how this application got before you, and the project meets all development criteria with the exception of the lot size, which is existing, so staff did not feel that was a problem. There's currently a limit on the number of food and beverage establishments in St. Helena, limited at 30. So if the commission chooses to approve this project, that will have to go before the city council for approval of the restaurant seat cap or the restaurant number cap. Again, the applicant proposes outdoor dining, including table service on the sidewalk, which is a typical use for many downtown developments, but it does require additional approvals. There's a discussion of the parking standards in the staff report, but essentially the existing use is 1,462 square feet, which require 2 off-street spaces. The applicant's proposing an additional square footage to bring the total to 1,784, which would require approximately 3 parking spaces. As mentioned, the site has no parking, so the applicant's proposing payment into the parking mitigation fund to cover the cost of 2 spaces, and the applicant has, I believe, 4 parking spaces available at 111 Main Street, which is within the 300-foot limitation or requirement for off-site parking. It's currently a title office on Main Street, and the parking would be accessed off Money Way.
Excuse me, it's 1361 Main.
Thank you, sir. 1361 Main Street. My apologies. It's a typo in the staff report. Kind of looking at this issue, that parking is only available after 5 p.m. currently, given that it's an office use. The applicant is okay and has no concerns with recording a parking agreement or an easement tying that parking to this site at the project site. However, it would only be available after 5 p.m. That would also preclude office or other than office uses going into that site in the future, should the title company leave or it be reused for a different parcel or property. Use. The applicant, again, is okay with that. So although there's 4 spaces available there, they're not available until after 5 p.m. Staff worked with the applicant to kind of come up with, well, how are we going to meet the parking requirements? And the number of 2 spaces or the fee for 2 spaces into the parking mitigation fund was seen as adequate for staff, given the kind of unique elements of the development, the fact that it's existing does not have any parking on site. It's a historic structure. It's in the parking impact zone, all of the numerous factors identified in the staff report. There are some other interesting conversations that have occurred. There's a parking lot directly across the street that's also at a bank. where parking would be available at 5 p.m. due to some relatively archaic laws limiting the ability for the owner of that property to allow to formally dedicate that parking to the applicant. We have an email saying it can be used, but there are legal limitations due to the fact that the property owner for that owns businesses that produce alcohol, wine, and so there's strange laws with regards to the ability to formally dedicate that parking for use that also serves alcohol. It's relatively unique. But so given all these limitations and the specifics identified in the staff report, staff feels like the proposed parking is adequate for the proposed use. The project meets the requirements of a categorical exemption under CEQA for Class 31 and Class 1. The water neutrality analysis identified that the project does comply with the requirements. Staff is recommending approval, and there were 2 letters in support which were received after the packet was put together, and those are on the dais for your review. Staff's available for any questions. The project architect and the property owners are here if there are any questions for that.
Are there any questions for staff? Are there any ex parte disclosures?
Yes. I have met with the applicant on different occasions, not seen the plan in its most recent stage. I've walked the property, but I've met with the applicant.
I also met with the applicant and saw its renderings in its early stage, but not the current in front of me.
I have also met with the applicant, and I did go through the building.
With that, I would like to open up the public hearing and invite the applicant to come forward.
Good evening, Antonio Castellucci. I live at 1155 Victoria Lane in San Helena for about 7 years. I've been in the Napa Valley for over 25 years, living here part-time. The reason we are here tonight is that when we purchased this building, so the advice to me was, you're going to make wine, so why don't you open a tasting room to showcase your wines? And so it seemed like, what a great idea that is, right? And so the property was leased for 1 year, and in the meantime, we received the permit to open this tasting room. So started off the construction, we got the permit, started the construction, and then suddenly I look around at the tasting room in San Helena, and I said, wow, who is going to come and taste these wines that nobody has seen before? Nobody recognized the label. So I thought it was going to be a total disaster for us, for San Helena, and for the community as well. So started to think about, this is a beautiful little building, and thanks to Howard Bakken and his team and Edmund here tonight, created something really special and something beautiful that will be fabulous for the neighbors, for the city, for everyone involved. So basically, started thinking, what can we do with this building? And suddenly, this idea of this pizzeria, who doesn't like pizza or pasta, right? So, and to be on Main Street, to have access to improving the northern part of Main Street, get a little more vibrancy on Main Street that we certainly need. And by talking to neighbors and people, friends, they are excited about this idea. And we are excited about this idea, and I hope you are excited about this idea. Any questions? I'm here.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions for the applicant? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak at the public hearing?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Lucio Dalla Gasparina. I live on Galeron Road, have for the last 10 years. I'm here just to show support of this project. I think it's important that the city of St. Helena supports family, affordable, and approachable dining. I think it's really important. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Pam Simpson. I'm representing the St. Helena Chamber of Commerce.
We are excited about this project. We think this is really a great thing for the Central Business District and for downtown Main Street. We know that you're going to be looking at the details of this project, but we at the Chamber look at Main Street sort of a little more pragmatically and are really trying to sort of, because the city doesn't really have a policy on what should happen on Main Street, at least try to provide some guidelines or some ideas of what we think should happen there, what you should keep in mind for Main Street. One, it should accent current businesses. We think this one does. It's certainly going to help the Y down. It's certainly going to help that end of the retail corridor draw people towards it. So we think that's great. Does it improve generally the experience of Main Street? Obviously this one does. As people walk by, it's going to have outdoor seating. It's very attractive, makes people want to stop, and provide some diversity down there. A pizzeria on Main Street is kind of a fun idea. So we think it fits that. And does it bring revenue to the city? And this will. It's taking place of a real estate office, which was there before, and so the fact that this is going to be actually drawing in sales tax revenue to the city, we're seeing that as a positive as well. So, and then number 4, does it appeal to locals and visitors alike? And I think, as the previous person just mentioned, that it does. It's going to be affordable. It's going to be a nice restaurant for everybody to enjoy, and so we like that. We think this project accomplishes all those things, and we'd like to have you keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak at the public hearing? Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing and invite commissioner discussion. Who would like to go first? I'll go first. I think the project is great. I think that it's a nice use of the space, given it was a real estate office, and I'm very happy it's not going to be a wine tasting room, and that the sales tax will stay in St. Helena and not be where the wine is actually shipped to if it had been a tasting room. And I'm in full support. Thank you. Short and sweet. No, I agree. When I met with the applicant and learned what his intentions were, I think that Mr. Castellucci's really captured what the town needs. My question to him was, had he thought through the pizzeria piece, only because we do have other pizzerias in town. But I think from the menu design and from the idea of really we're saying pizzeria, but we're really talking about Italian bistro with more menu options, and I felt a little better about that, and I'm in support.
I like the project a lot. I only have one thing that I'd like to add to the conditions, and that is that the historical research report is asking for a paint that reflects the 1890s, and I think Mr. Castellucci should do that.
Thank you for bringing that up, Grace.
Yeah.
Does
I
that
have
mean
that
it's
as my note as
peeling,
well.
I just really
Thank
think
you,
that I mean, that was the only thing that I saw that was not. Anyway, that's my only comment. I really think it's a great project, but I think we should add that to the conditions.
And I did want to add one comment. I think as we think through parking on Main Street, this is a business model that's intended to attract locals and people to walk.
Absolutely.
And I think that there's not a lot about that in the staff report. But in addition to the historical constraints of the property, the business use and the business plan for this property is to encourage locals to walk. So it shouldn't attract additional parking requirements, although we do want the money in the fund. So.
I think it's a great project. I agree with what everyone has said. My only question for my fellow commissioners.
Your microphone's not on.
The Harvest Inn. And one of the issues we had at the Harvest Inn was that the permit there said nothing about what the restaurant was really going to be like and what the beverage service would be like or wouldn't be like. Some of my fellow commissioners were concerned about precedent setting,
Right.
and I'm wondering if anybody thinks it would be prudent or if we can even craft a condition here that captures the business model that we all like, so that if there was a major change, it might have to come back to the commission for further review.
Can you speak to the issue, too, that we have to have a cap on the restaurants? Are we even at that point yet? Don't we have to still get city council approval on the cap raising before we actually dial in a use permit?
Oh,
The approval is subject to approval of the restaurant cap increase. So rather than take it to the council first, we brought it to the planning commission. If it was past practice to go to council first, that may have been. Staff is comfortable conditioning the approval upon ultimate approval of the restaurant seat cap by the council, especially given that the council has expressed support to remove that limitation in the general plan.
So if that's the case, this is our time to discuss these items. We don't- It's not
100%.
coming back to us.
That's
Okay.
completely right.
Yeah.
All right. If that's the case, then I agree with you. I think we need to.
And you think we need to beef up number 55 on the building department conditions approval with the ABC license and maybe kind of clarify, is it a full-service restaurant? What the limitations are. I don't think we need to get into the menu nitty-gritty, but I do think we need to address the alcohol.
So is the direction that the approval includes beer, wine, and spirits? Service of beer, wine, and spirits?
If so licensed.
55 on the,
Yeah.
Right.
And if we,
Do we need to, do you want to speak to casual dining? I mean, I think, to me, we didn't hem that in, but
That would be at the discretion of the commission. What that would mean would be that, and this gets into a little bit of some staff concerns with enforceability and there's a
exactly
lot of
limitation of
discretion.
exactly like casual jewelry versus, so I mean,
So staff would recommend
hear what-
against doing
but-
that, but
Right.
the commission has in the past done
Right.
that. But it does create numerous challenges for staff to try to make a discretion. So if, for instance, if the commission said this action approves only casual dining at this site, any change to that would require returning to the commission and a modification of the use permit. You would put the determination on the staff's shoulders to decide what is and isn't casual dining, and that's not necessarily defined. It may be, I could check the definitions, but those are the types of conditions that prove very challenging for staff to implement. So if you are approving a 55-seat restaurant today, from staff's perspective, based on the current conditions, that could be converted to fine dining tomorrow. If you would like to address that, please do, but just understand staff is going to be relatively conservative in making determinations and would requiring applicants to come back to you, similar to the Harvest Inn situation, because of some of the past practices that have occurred and the past perceptions of the decisions that were made at a staff level previously.
I don't,
That makes me question how we interpret this condition number 9, which goes into every permit that says, provided they're in general compliance with the approved use permit and design review, minor modifications found to be in substantial conformance with the approved design and use may be approved by the planning
your
director.
microphone.
So do you think that?
Mary, your
that
microphone.
Microphone's not on.
Sorry.
he hates that microphone.
Related to condition number 9, do you think that that gives you enough discretion that if someone came in and said, forget the local-based pizzeria, bistro, I'm going to, totally change the restaurant concept here? Is that the provision that you would be looking at, or?
This action is approving a 55-seat restaurant, not a pizzeria. So I wouldn't even question
Okay.
that condition. That condition is intended to give the director the determination, whereas if we approved a 300-square-foot kitchen addition and in creating working drawings, it needed to go to 350 square feet or 2 feet higher to screen the rooftop equipment, that gives me the discretion to do that. Again, it's substantial conformance is a technical term that I include in that condition intentionally because I need to be able to find that it's in conformance with the approval of the commission and the discussion that was had at that time in order to bless that. And as I mentioned, staff will be conservative in that determination.
Yeah, I'm not looking to tie up the applicant. I only raised this because in the case of the Harvest Inn, there was a lot of consternation about the end product and serving beer, and there was nothing, we had the same kind of use permit, and I was fine with it. I didn't find anything in that use permit that said you can't do this. And, I'm fine not adding more conditions. I just
Yeah,
wanted to raise it because people were concerned last time.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm fine with leaving it and dealing with it as it comes about. My sense is, you couldn't imagine anyone. I don't eat pizza. Pizza and pasta is not on my food plan, but organic salad. You got me there, so I totally support this. I think it's a great idea, and yeah.
I have a question for staff. Is it worth looking into making it so that the conditions with parking that we have add a finding that we found that this was a walking-friendly restaurant, to throw that in there, or no, you don't want to throw it?
You could. It's not legally required for the decision.
Okay.
And it'd be hard, it would be difficult to enforce.
The finding is a legal justification for a decision. It's not the same as a condition. So it would be the commission making a determination that the lack of parking is adequate because it's a walkable
I was
site
just
in
thinking of
downtown. But
50 years from now, people wondering and looking back, and why did they think that way? And that is one of the reasons behind findings, is to have a little bit of a roadmap of why did they do in lieu, and why were they okay with this?
so you would be explaining more of the justification rather than actually talking about what's required of the applicant.
So you're saying just add it in the findings?
Yeah, just add in, in the findings of saying, just this is why we came to this decision.
I think that makes perfect sense, but I wouldn't hem in.
It wouldn't affect.
It wouldn't be a condition, no.
It's not a condition, but it further justifies the decision.
All right. Do we have a motion?
I move that we determine that the project is exempt from the requirements of CEQA pursuant to Section 15331 and 15301, Class 31 and Class 1 categorical exemptions, which exempt the restoration and reconstruction of historic structures in keeping with the established criteria and guidelines, and the leasing and or minor alteration of existing facilities. That we accept the required findings and approve the request for the use permit to operate a restaurant from the building located at 1414 Main Street, and that we accept the required findings and approve the design review for the proposed addition to the rear and side of the building and other minor modifications to the property located at 1414 Main Street. Do I need to add anything?
We need to add the color with with the historian's letter, and we need to add the parking
You could also just say as directed.
as directed.
As directed.
As directed.
Thank you.
Second.
Commissioner Monette,
Yes.
Commissioner Kistner,
Yes.
Commissioner Koberstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Sweeney,
Yes.
Chairperson Parker.
Yes. Thank you very much. Moving on to our department report, for an opportunity for staff to report and update the commission on relevant matters.
Just a few brief things for the department report. One, I wanted to mention the Sonoma State University Planning Commissioners Conference is occurring this Saturday, and I apologize for not providing this information earlier. It is a really good conference I've attended. However, I just found out about it Monday. It wasn't on my radar. However, if there are any commissioners interested in attending, the city will cover the cost of the training, but we have money in the training budget for that. It's a really good conference for commissioners, and I will definitely remember to bring it up next year, and we'll try to all go as a group. And it does provide AICP continuing credits for anyone who's an AICP planner. Senior planner Heacock here is. And then also, separate from that, there's one or two other things. One, on October 9th, the Governor Brown signed legislation which consisted of 3 bills, 2 Senate bills, and 1 Senate bill and 2 Assembly bills, called the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act, essentially regulating all elements of medical marijuana, 5 distinct categories. It's basically setting up ABC for medical marijuana. And in that legislation, it directs cities and local jurisdictions who want to add regulations to continue to regulate medical marijuana under their own jurisdictions, must have regulations in place by March 1st. Otherwise, state minimums will go into effect. Currently, City of St. Helena prohibits outdoor cultivation of medical marijuana and prohibits through permissive zoning other types of activities such as dispensaries, delivery services, etc. Staff is working diligently to bring an ordinance back to codify the current standards for medical marijuana, and that will be on the next agenda because that's the only way we can actually meet the deadline. If we don't meet the deadline, I don't think there's going to be that much ramifications, but staff's goal is to meet the requirements.
We don't need more ramifications.
Yeah.
No.
Thank you.
So that will be coming back to the commission at the next meeting.
Perfect. Thank you.
Do we get a report of
We
irrelevant
can
issues?
taste it?
They may be more.
I
You
don't
guys are
believe
all
samples will
horrible.
be provided. And then
I'll bring
last,
snickerdoodles.
last issue we have,
Exciting.
if you turn to tab 9 in your packet, staff was reviewing the design review requirements and under applicability, and we've had some discussions regarding this. Kind of individual commissioners have voiced concerns over essentially the fact that every addition to or any modification to any structure in town almost comes back before the commission. So Aaron here, Senior Planner Heacock, was doing some review, and we found some language here which is somewhat buried under some other language, but design review shall not be required for the following. Any form of repair or maintenance where the work solely involves replacement of materials in like kind and form. So everyone knows that, and you're allowed to maintain your property and replace it as is. If you're not changing it, there's no need for design review. It goes on to say, or to any such work in areas not visible to the public, from the public right-of-way, or areas accessible to the public. So staff finds that to mean that, for example, the 320 square foot addition to the rear of a home up on, I don't remember if it was Spring Mountain Road or Big Rock Road that came before the commission a couple meetings ago, that technically does not require design review, and staff would like to begin to implement this. It's not even an exemption. It just says design review doesn't apply. It will be at staff's determination and the discretion of the director. So there will be some decisions that are made in order to decide how this is implemented. But staff finds that it would greatly streamline the process for small additions at the rear of a home, where essentially the only thing we're looking at is there's no need to really look at it because it doesn't have any impacts. Staff, again, will be conservative in administering this policy, but staff wanted to point it out in a public forum to get commissioner support for implementing the code as it's written and as it's interpreted by staff today. There's no specific square footage limitation, so in theory, if it was not visible from public right-of-way, someone could construct a small addition, small being kind of relative, but maybe 500 square feet, 600 square feet if it wasn't visible. And so staff wanted to bring this up. It's going to be at the discretion of the director, but we wanted to bring this up to the commission to first get buy-in, and second, have a discussion if needed or get any feedback.
So I have a question on this. So then this isn't with the building permit where a home is.
Absolutely not.
Just want to make sure,
So
because
when
there
you-
are quite a few homes that aren't visible from the public.
So when you say no impact, you mean water, I mean, what do you mean by, you say if it has no, if it's not visible and has no impact?
It
That's
just
what
says visible.
Well, you just said it with no impact. So
I'm sorry, I meant visible impacts relative to context, scale, and visibility of a neighborhood.
Okay.
So it's still, all development would still have to require or still meet the compliance of the water neutrality ordinance. It would still meet all building permit requirements. It would,
Okay.
none of those would go out of the way. It just would be at the,
Got you.
staff would be required to implement those versus bringing it to the commission.
Wow. Okay.
I just have a question about this. I didn't quite read it that way. I read it, what it's talking about is you're doing repairs or maintenance.
And then it says or.
You're replacing with materials of like kind. So that's one thing. You know, maybe you got a back porch that needs some work. You're going to put back exactly what was there. And then it says, or any such work, which I think also means repair or maintenance, not visible to the public.
But why would the statement, it would basically be redundant. It would be saying the same thing twice.
Because it's
No,
our
you could be
code.
doing repair or maintenance, and it wouldn't have to be like kind or whatever. You could be doing repair or maintenance, and it's not visible. That was the way I read it, but who knows? You know, it just seemed to me that that's what it was getting at.
As much as I like the idea of streamlining, I think that such work is those are very important words, which I think are saying such work is maintenance work, is what you're saying. This is not
Repair or maintenance
Yeah,
work.
this is
It's-
not adding a brand new addition. As much as I love that idea, because I definitely am on the less is more administrator side of this commission. However, I think we could run into some trouble with that. Such work to me is referring to the same sentence. It's not a new sentence. It's the same sentence.
Right.
However, that does maybe. I know we've talked about kind of reviewing design review in general.
So a good example today would be
Okay, what's a better
Joel
one than
Gott's
addition?
project,
Yes.
which is completely to the rear of the home.
Yes.
Was it an addition?
Isn't that,
No
is that
addition.
repair or maintenance? though?
So what
He was adding a large covered patio.
Yeah, that was new construction.
New construction. So so it sounds like Commissioner Koberstein is saying it's only repair and maintenance that this applies to.
Existing
That's just the
structure.
way I read it.
Yeah,
It's either repair or maintenance, it's exactly what was there, or it's repair or maintenance that nobody can see.
That doesn't necessarily mean it's exactly what's there. So you could change a 5.0 window to a 7.0 window. You could change your stucco siding to horizontal lap siding, but not
Yeah.
additional structures. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think this says what you just mentioned, which is the first part of the sentence is dealing with, you know, I mean, I live in a 100-year-old shingled house, and so I replace shingles, but at some point I could say, the heck with that, I want to replace it with lap siding. I'm replacing siding, one item or type of siding for another type of siding.
So it's not like for like.
Right, so that's the first part of the sentence. And the second part is, I'm still interpreting this to be maintenance that might be replacing windows, or I have fixed windows and now I'm going to put in,
Right.
I understand.
Changing
Or
out
I think you could put
doors.
a different siding if it wasn't visible from the street.
right, and there's
Or-
going to be design review. So it's
So-
not so much about repairing as replacing, but maintaining function, but that's quite a bit different than saying someone could do an addition.
So I understand. I'm hearing the addition. So I'm trying to get the nuance of how far the commission is understanding this to mean. So what if someone was converting a window to a door or a door to a
That's
window?
fine. Like I'd be fine with that. And I'd actually be fine going a little farther, but I don't think our community would be fine. And I
Or
don't
we'd
think-
have to codify it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the idea of saying you're going to replace one similarly a functional item with something else is different than saying I'm going to add a bedroom because you can't see it. And, you know, there is a lot of concern that things happen under the cover of darkness, and I think that's what we don't want to make this look like we're using this particular sentence to support those fears. I think this is about maintenance
And minor
Updating.
modifications to existing structures that do not expand the footprint.
yes.
Okay.
The door to the window, French doors from a wall. I mean, I think those are perfectly acceptable things.
Maybe till we get used to it, if there's something that you think might be controversial.
Grace, your microphone.
Just put the consent calendar and indicate that this would be, it's your discretion under that, and just put it on the consent calendar so we can see it. And if we have a problem with it, then we can say so.
So the issue with that is it basically still brings the project back before the commission with the staff report, with the presentation. So it-
But I think what Noah's trying to do is avoid that. Could another example be, we have a bedroom that's get converted to or a sunroom that gets converted to a bedroom? So that's still the same square footage.
that if it was all internal, that would be permitted. That's no design review needed
Yeah.
or
It's
any
under the
planning
roof
approval
still.
needed. But I understand what Commissioner Kitchener is directing, and maybe as we begin to implement this, or we continue to implement the current language, but based on this conversation, we could include some of the decisions that were made in the department report. And then if there was one that was made that the commission felt was beyond the scope of what this allows, then staff could be reminded of that. And
And then you could really get the
exactly.
feel for it.
Yes.
That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, completely understood. Yeah, okay.
Us too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Be a learning experience for all of us.
Yes.
And question,
Streamlining is better, though, because we're bogging up big projects with little projects, and
That-
that's
and-
not good.
and are you working on that with coming up with some language for us to?
So there has been some direction or discussions with individual communications with individual commissioners regarding a desire to streamline some of the requirements. Staff is looking at that, but it probably will not be until we look at a comprehensive zoning code update after the general plan is adopted.
And I just wanted to, I had remembered, apparently erroneously, because I think, Grace, you remembered differently. I had remembered, I thought we had passed the thing that you're talking about, up to 250 square feet could be built without, commission review. And then I thought the planning commission had, this is when Gary Broad was trying to streamline things. And I thought we had passed it, and then someone, I guess, Sarah, you didn't remember us passing. I thought we had. I thought that the city council also had okayed it, but I was wrong. But I was wondering, where would that kind of a proposal or language have been present, how would that have been presented? It was presented, in what form? It wouldn't be on, how would you present that?
It would be an ordinance revising the Muni Code.
Okay,
And it would be with the specific language. Planning Commission would be able to see it, City Council would be able to see it, there'd be public hearings.
Yeah.
There would be direction to staff whether it was adequate or
And
appropriate.
it was presented to us, but we turned, it was 3 items, and we said no to all 3.
I know, I thought that one had passed the City Council, but, had gone to City Council, and that they had.
No, we killed it
Obviously
here.
wrong, but I just wanted to say that this isn't a new effort in that, I encourage you to keep working on it.
All right. Anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you, that's
All right.
all.
With that, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much.